All right. So, a couple hours ago, I finished up watching the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Two. Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the movie. And I guess I'll just cut to the chase of it. I didn't really like it. Wasn't a big fan. Uh didn't like it as much as the first one, if I'm being honest. Um Now, bear in mind, this might have been because of the environment I watched it in. I will add that. Uh, just pretext the type of people that were within the theater as I was watching it were exactly who you'd expect. The usual suspects. Um, Also, a bit of a jarring moment to realize that aside from myself, me and Colby were probably the oldest people within that theater at that current point in time, which is a very interesting revelation to have. And so, yeah, me, Colby, and CJ and Kai, we all went to watch the movie. And while CJ and Kai had their complaints about the lore stuff, they didn't like it because of the lore that was wrong. I don't know the Five Nights at Freddy's lore as much as they do. I stopped paying attention to it when there was life goo that was metal that brought people and animatronics as one. That was too far gone. I couldn't possibly care at that point. But as a normal spectator of this movie, viewing it as just a movie on its own, I don't think it was very good. I really don't. It wasn't terrible by any means, but I just don't think it was very good. Um, I'll try to be as non-spoiler as I can, and I'll start with the positives. Again, like the first movie, had very good visuals. It was very like the animatronics were perfect, exactly what you'd want them to look like. Aside from one little thing with a static on TV being very clearly um, rendered on to a blank TV screen, I think visually it was phenomenal once again. Um, Big issue though. Uh, well, no, I'm not getting into issues. Still positives here. Um, Also, chatting with Colby about this afterwards. I agree with what he said. It was definitely a little scarier than the first one. It definitely had better scares, better jumps, better mood. I'd have to say in the environments. It gave when they were at the pizzerias in the movie, specifically the pizzeria where the toy animatronics and the puppet come from. Very good environmental storytelling, I guess. It like the vibe was there. The vibe was there that it was unsettling, and that was very good. And this good is also gonna be a bit of a spoiler, but it's not too much of a spoiler. At one point, Josh Hutcherson's character basically ends up actually playing the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 game in the movie, and I thought that was very good. That was an ingenious move on their part to have that, because that was one of the big complaints about the first movie that I had is it didn't seem like he was actually doing like the night guard thing that made the Five Nights at Freddy's game wise interesting. So seeing him do that on this one in some way, I thought was a very good move. I really enjoyed that. But that's probably about it for the goods because I feel like the story and character motivations were extremely weak in this movie, which I guess that sh- shouldn't be like they're not going to have the most complex stories for a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I mean, the story itself actually in the game's incredibly complex uh, from an outside perspective, but from what I can muster, it's pretty straightforward in terms of what to expect. And in this movie, I think the straightforwardness might have been too much because the character motivations were essentially boiled down to, especially for the marionette, the puppet, was because I feel like it. That was essentially the vibe I got from that is I'm gonna be evil because I felt like it. And the sister, her entire plot was also odd because she wanted to be back with the animatronics like she did at the end of the first movie, which is still weird. And that was basically her entire plot device was wanting to reunite with the animatronics, which I guess is fine, but I feel like her sense of her self preservation was non existent in this movie. She had no sense of self preservation in this one, even less so than the first one. And then the other character, the lady Vanessa, I think her story might have been the only one that made sense throughout of the movie. Um, but just overall, just the whole thing really just boiled down to it felt rushed. The story felt really rushed towards the end specifically. Like the first half kind of dragged on a little bit. It does take a little while for the actual animatronic stuff to happen, which again, not a bad thing. You don't want to show off your golden goose at the very beginning of the movie, but when it finally does happen, it doesn't feel rewarding to me as the audience member. It didn't feel like how do I want to put this? It didn't feel like terrifying. It didn't feel scary when they showed up. It felt expected when it happened, which I feel like especially in a movie adaptation of a game based on jump scares, you don't want something to feel expected. And once the main villain animatronics show up, it you're just kind of all right. They're just they did essentially rehash the introduction of the animatronics from the first one, but with the toys this time, um, which was a little again disappointing. I think a lot of the problem too is like I said, there's good setting that had good set pieces, didn't utilize it. They did not utilize the great set pieces. The little bit of spoiler: the final act ends up taking place inside of Mike's house, where I feel like the final act and the majority of the movie again should have taken place within the location where the toy animatronics and puppet are at. Like, I feel like that makes more sense, especially to stay accurate to the game, which the first one did do that. They stayed at the old rundown pizzeria for the most part, and the final conclusion took place there. But this one doesn't do that. I think I think aside from the point where he's actually playing the game, the part I really enjoyed, they're only ever in that pizzeria like one other time of significance. and that's really it. Like the main characters themselves are only each in there one other time, which is it just sucks because it had such good it was such a good setting. It was so good. It was way better than the first setting. They had so much detail to it, and they only spend a handful of scenes in there, and that just sucks. It sucks that, and I wish there was more of that point of him actually playing the game in that, because I feel like that was where it felt that the stakes were heightened because he was right there getting assaulted by the animatronics. They were coming for him. They wanted to kill him at that point, and he was trying to survive. And they just that point does not come across in this movie. That for the majority of the time they're not really trying to survive. It's a lot of fetch quests, which doesn't really work for a horror movie. I think that was the conclusion I kind of came to on my own. Was this wasn't? It didn't feel like a horror movie. Looking back on it after the movie ended, it felt like I watched like more of an action movie. That gets to the suspenseful part, and they're going in car chases and stuff, and fighting. But it didn't. It wasn't like the I I gotta hide behind the mask and hope they don't see me. Oh, I gotta make sure I click the light on. I gotta survive. Like outside of the part where Mike is in the building doing that, there's really not any other point that it felt like it was a horror movie. And that's probably my biggest complaint about it. Actually, no. Here's my biggest complaint, and this will bring spoilers. The ending, I think, ruined it. What would have made for, I would have argued that this would have been slightly better than the first movie had it not been for the ending being so rushed and the plot devices that they had to use to make the characters go out of character to make what they wanted for the ending work did not work for me. Because essentially, Mike, he, when it all concludes, he's like, "You, Vanessa, you suck. You're the bad guy," despite the fact that she didn't really do anything wrong the whole movie. She was actually more prominent and helpful than he was, but for some reason, he decided she was the bad guy for no reason and then leaves. And then Vanessa leaves her inside of his own house as they go off to who knows where. And then Vanessa gets possessed by the puppet, and that's how it ends. And then there's a secret ending where they tease Five Nights at Freddy's 3. So I'm assuming the conclusion to that will happen. The conclusion to what happened in this movie will happen in the third movie. There's no indication when that third movie will be, or if they've even started production on it. I'm gonna have to assume they have, but it just felt like they were just rushing to get to the third movie, which is I don't think you want to do that. You want to establish when you're making if it is gonna be a trilogy, or if they're just gonna keep going and make 5 or 10 movies based on the games, you want to establish each individual movie as something special. And I don't think this movie really did that. While it had good moments, really good moments, it each of those moments were overshadowed by the fact that there was a lot of sea of emptiness to this movie. Like there's a lot of, ooh, the sister has the science fair that she's not gonna be doing good in because the teacher decided that he doesn't think she's good for some reason. There's no really explanation why the teachers didn't like her. I think he was just an a-hole. Like that's essentially what that boiled down to. And then there's a festival, a Five Nights at Freddy's festival in or Fazbear festival in the town based on the hysteria from the first movie's results. And the only thing that had any expansion on that is that the animatronics walked around in the festival with no concern to what is happening. It doesn't add any plot. There was just stuff. Stuff just happened sometimes that really had no reason to happen. They just kind of happened. And I think that was where it was at its weakest. Was I it felt like like I said, it just felt like they rushed things. It felt like they went too fast to go through it, which I get they probably did have to, or else they'd have a Stranger Things scenario going on where they have the sister who's supposed to be a middle schooler. Uh, she's already almost taller than Josh Hutcherson, which I'm gonna have to look up how tall he is because I think pretty much everybody in that movie towered over him. And if my thoughts are correct, then that looks terribly for my own perception of myself. Um, but no, I think overall, while it did have very strong and fun moments, as somebody who's a little bit of a fan of the series and just a fan of horror in general, I don't think it was a very strong entry into the Five Nights at Freddy's series or horror as in general. Not terrible though. Like it's not a terrible movie. It's just not a very good one. So I think overall I'll have to give it like a 5 out of 10. Like I think I gave the first one a 6, and I think this one was not as strong as the first one. So I think a 5 is about where it's gonna land. I feel neither incredibly positive or incredibly negative towards it. Just a little disappointed, I guess I'll say. Um, and honestly, uh, that's really all I had to say. Wish I did these more often. I've been watching a lot of movies, but been busy. And I just got a new XLR cable, so hopefully my audio didn't cut out at all throughout this, or else that means the mic is the problem. But that's a problem for future Caleb. But anyway, I'll cut it off there. And if you guys like this one, I will do more movie reviews in the future. So I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.